Hello, my name is Andrew Ahn Westover, and I am the Keith Haring Director of Education and Public Engagement at the New Museum. I join you today from the unceded land of Lenape people, and I'd like to begin by acknowledging and paying respect to Lenape people and elders and ancestors, past, present, and future. On behalf of the New Museum, I am glad to welcome you to our 2020 Visionaries series, a highlight of the museum's calendar. The Stuart Regan Visionaries series is an annual program honoring individuals who have made major contributions to art and culture and who are actively imagining a better future. The series is made possible by the Stuart Regan Visionaries Fund, established by a gift from Barbara Gladstone in honor of her son, Stuart Regan. Additional support for the Visionaries series is provided by the Charlotte and Bill Ford Artist Talks Fund. New Museum digital initiatives are generously supported by Hermione and David B. Heller. We thank each of these generous supporters and supporters like you for making this program possible. Tonight, we will hear from two leading figures in our nation's intellectual life. We are pleased to honor Claudia Rankine in conversation with Judith Butler for the 2020 New Museum Visionaries. This is the first time the two have spoken together in public, and convenings like this are core to the New Museum's work of advancing new art and new ideas. I would like to particularly thank Lisa Phillips, Tony Devon-Lewis Director, and Massimiliano Gioni, Edlis Neeson Artistic Director, for their vision and support of this conversation, and the entire Education and Public Engagement Department, especially Andrea Calderis and Derek Wright, for their help bringing this program together. I know that many of you are familiar with tonight's speakers, so I will only share brief highlights from each speaker's biography before the conversation begins. Claudia Rankine is the author of 5 collections of poetry, including Citizen and American Lyric, and Don't Let Me Be Lonely, 2 plays, including The White Card and Provenance of Beauty, a South Bronx Travelogue, as well as numerous video collaborations. In all her work, whether writing about intimacy or alienation, Rankine's voice is one of unrelenting candor, and her poetry is some of the most innovative and thoughtful work to emerge in recent years. Her work often crosses genres as it tracks wild and precise movements of mind. Her most recent publication, Just Us, An American Conversation, is a collection of essays with Graywolf Press. She is also the editor of several anthologies, including The Racial Imaginary, Writers on Race in the Life of the Mind. In 2016, she co-founded the Racial Imaginary Institute. Among her numerous awards and honors, Rankine is the recipient of the Bobbitt National Prize for Poetry, the Poets and Writers Jackson Poetry Prize, and fellowships from the Guggenheim Foundation, the Lannan Foundation, the MacArthur Foundation, United States Artists, and the National Endowment of the Arts. She is a Chancellor of the Academy of American Poets and teaches at Yale University as the Frederick Eisman Professor of Poetry. She lives in New Haven, Connecticut. Judith Butler is a philosopher, literary critic, and gender theorist, active in gender and sexual politics and human rights and anti-war politics. They are the Maxine Elliott Professor in the Department of Comparative Literature and the Program of Critical Theory at the University of California, Berkeley. They are the author of many influential texts, including Gender Trouble, Feminism and the Subversion of Identity, Bodies That Matter, On the Discursive Limits of Sex, Undoing Gender, Precarious Life, Notes Towards a Performative Theory of Assembly, and The Force of Nonviolence in 2020. Their books have been translated in 27 languages. Butler is the recipient of many awards and international distinctions, including the Andrew Mellon Award for Distinguished Academic Achievement in the Humanities, the Adorno Prize, the Brudner Prize, and the Research Lecturer Honor at UC Berkeley in 2005. Other fellowships include the Guggenheim, Rockefeller, Ford, American Council of Learned Societies, and selection as a fellow at the Institute for Advanced Study at Princeton, and at the Collège des Hautes-Études in Paris. They have received 11 honorary degrees. In 2013, they were awarded the diploma of Chevalier of the Order of Arts and Letters from the French Cultural Ministry. In 2015, they were elected as a corresponding fellow of the British Academy, and in 2019, elected to the American Academy of Arts and Sciences. They are presently the president of the Modern Language Association. A few logistical notes now before we begin. This program will last for 1 hour. If time allows, we may have a brief Q&A at the end. If you would like to ask a question, feel free to use the Q&A function at any time by clicking the Q&A button located at the bottom of your screen to type your question. Please note that this program is being recorded, so your question will be recorded as well. If there is time, our speakers will answer questions during the Q&A at the end of the program. Also, closed captioning is available. If you would like to use this service, click the closed captioning button at the bottom of the screen. Please note that captioning is provided by a live captioner, Nicole Bresnick, working in real time. Finally, we have several upcoming public programs as well as a full suite of exclusive digital content available on our website, which I encourage you to check out at newmuseum.org. And now, without further ado, I turn the conversation over to tonight's honorees, Judith Butler and Claudia Rankine.
It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm enormously pleased to be in conversation with Claudia, whose work I love and whose sensibility I cherish. And I wanted to thank the New Museum for honoring her as a visionary. This is the occasion in which we are meeting. And she is a visionary for her major contribution to art and culture and for actively imagining a better future. I think the active imagining part is I'm very definitely with that part. And I also want to thank all the people that make this possible and who have sustained the New Museum through hard times. Claudia and I both express our wish that good faith efforts are being made with the furloughed workers and the union at the New Museum and all the workers who have produced the New Museum as such a valuable cultural institution for us. We have relied on all their good work in the past, and we trust that we will see them again. Claudia, would you like to start us off by reading from your book, Just Us, which will be part of our conversational topic to this evening? I think maybe most people know the book, but maybe not, or maybe like me, they would love to hear it again.
It would be my pleasure, Judith, and I want to thank you. You're such a hero, a longtime hero for me, my visionary. So it's kind of unusual not to talk to you without a tennis match happening, which is when we usually are in discourse. But this is the opening piece in Just Us. I'm going to read the first and last section. What does it mean to want an age-old call for change, not to change, and yet also to feel bullied by the call to change? How is a call to change named shame, named penance, named chastisement? How does one say, what if, without reproach? The root of chastise is to make pure. The impossibility of that. Is that what repels and not the call for change? What if? What I want from you is new, newly made. A new sentence in response to all my questions. A swerve in our relation with the words that carry us, the care that carries. I am here without the shrug, attempting to understand how what I want and what I want from you run parallel. Justice and the openings for just us. So that's how the book begins.
You know, your previous books announce themselves. Well, you have two books that have an American lyric as the subtitle, and this one has American conversation as the subtitle. I'm wondering if you want to talk to us a little bit about the relationship you see between lyric and conversation.
Well, you know, the lyric has always been understood as a kind of overhearing of private thoughts, and it is grounded in the feeling aspect, the affect aspect of human beings, and so I felt that Lonely and Citizen was trying to make tangible through the lyric emotions and invisible gestures and things that happen so quickly and then live in your body. Whereas Just Us is more an anatomy of a conversation. The attempt was to defamiliarize the conversation by turning it into a document and then butterflying it out into the structural institutional racism, the ways in which a comment here actually has a long history that moves it into structural racism and is not just one person's unfortunate spill in a random moment, but actually it's coming out of deep-rooted things in our society.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Did you want to read a little bit more from the book before we go further with that conversation?
In terms of the essays?
Yeah, up to you.
Yeah, the book is, it's funny, it's full of erasures. I don't know, I'm beginning to think that I have a sense of humor that doesn't translate. I put the erasures in there as a sort of metaphor of what this kind of racism results in. I mean, erasure to the point of death and in other ways too. Well, why don't I read, because your book, The Force of Nonviolence that just came out, which I have right here, starts with a sort of investigation of the term violence and what nonviolence versus violence is. And so maybe I'll start by reading a section called Violent in Just Us. A white friend who's aware I'm writing on perceptions of whiteness phones to recount an interaction she just had with her child. I have questioned her on previous occasions regarding how whiteness is talked about in her family, in her home, in her world. She is white, her husband is white, their child is white. This day, her young son returned home from school upset. An Asian boy told him he ruined his drawing of Goldilocks and the Three Bears by coloring Goldilocks' skin brown. His son knows there are also people in the world with brown skin. My friend assures her son that he has nothing to worry about. And that's the first, I'm only going to read the first paragraph in that essay, but we also have the drawing that he made that, but I wanted to start there, maybe to think about the fact that this, the acculturation into these ideas of white supremacy among whites begins at the get-go. Mm-hmm. You don't have to grow, you don't have to grow up to turn into Mitch McConnell.
Yeah.
You can,
It's right there waiting for you.
Exactly.
I'm always a little surprised when people are taken aback by you, Claudia, because you say very direct things, and you wander into airports and talk to people in line, and some maybe creepy white guys, and yet you give them a you give them a conversation. You're interested in what they have to say, and and yet it seems to me that you produce an opening that most people don't, right? That white people stay encased in their racism and their various ways of disavowing their racism, which are very habitual, and it allows them to sleep well at night, I presume. And and you know, a lot of people of color just say like, why have this conversation? You know, like this isn't going anywhere. But it's an opening, which is why I thought maybe not to be all lit crit about it, but that there was a lyric moment, a kind of apostrophic moment, right? Like you're addressing somebody, like hello, like also saying I am here, I'm still here. But you're also saying hello, like there's an opening to another, and it's like, what are they going to do with that? And it's deeply um, unexpected, maybe even startling, and some people go with it and some do not. But it's as if you are waiting for something to happen in the exchange. And you once wrote on Adrienne Rich, who was very important to my formation as a human and as a queer person. Rich writes that the moment of change is the only poem, and I just thought, well, it looks like you're soliciting a moment of change, uh, wondering whether it might happen, not knowing how it might happen. So I was wondering whether the lyric and the conversation come together there, wondering whether not some sudden breakthrough where black and white person suddenly understand each other totally, but they get what the struggle is, or something about that struggle is acknowledged or laid bare.
Well, there are many ways to answer that. But can I start by reading you my favorite Frantz Fanon quote,
Yeah.
which I happen to have right here because it's written inside this book. But he says, as soon as I desire, I am asking to be considered. I am not merely here and now, sealed into thingness. I am for somewhere else and for something else. I demand that notice be taken of my negating activity insofar as I pursue something other than life, insofar as I do battle for the creation of a human world. That is a world of reciprocal recognitions. So if you think about the lyric as a kind of reciprocal recognition in a sense, that I think is what I'm after. My favorite word in all the words is the word here, which I talk about in Lonely. And it is that sense of having here, I am here, a presence, also be a gift to another. Here, I say to you, here, I am here. And so for me, that those moments of possible discourse, because one never knows how far those conversations with strangers will go, is the moment where I feel like in the world I'm saying, here, I am here. and what are we going to do with that? You know, and not only am I here, I understand that you are here too. Mm-hmm. And I think that sort of our foundations in white supremacy gave us foundations in segregation, and asked us to stay separate. And a lot of white people have, nice liberal white people have maintained that segregationist attitude in this world. They never, they will go a life without having people of color at their dinner table. You're like, how did you manage that? But they manage it, and so when I came up with the idea to approach white men, and not all of them are creepy, some of them are okay. Like my husband's okay.
I trust that.
Some of them, yeah. But I was really interested in them. And I know it's not, I know people are like, why talk to white people? But since I live with a person who's white, That's not why I did it, though. I did it because I'm interested, because I am surrounded by white people.
Mhm.
And I am entangled with them in many ways, not just in my marriage, but in my life, in my work, in my students, my collaborators, the man in the bank. This is the world we have. And if we're going to divorce ourselves from people in the population, then we have given up a certain power to engage in change together.
Mhm.
Is my feeling.
Mhm. It seems to me that there's an openness in that. It's as if it's an invitation to talk, but to talk in a way that won't cover over the depth of white supremacy, or the depth of a white person's formation in white supremacy, because no white person has not been formed in white supremacy. It's not at least in our shared world, right? We all come up through it in one way or another, even though we may come to think of ourselves as, I'm definitely not racist, I combat racism, and yet what we reproduce in our daily lives and in our ways of perceiving, in our ways of talking, our gestures, our movement, our sociality, there is a reproduction of that segregationist world, and a fearfulness about losing, white privilege as a space of mobility and as a space of speech. But there's some kind of invitation in it, and I think this is the part that I'm always confused about. When people are like, "Well, what is she looking for? What does she want of us?" It's like,
Did they say that about me?
kind of like this, this like, oh my God! But you actually say at the beginning, you say, um, um, and you read it to us. How does one say, "What if," without reproach? And it's not a question to yourself how not to reproach the other. I took it, maybe I'm wrong, you'll correct me. I took it as, I'm going to be heard as leveling a reproach. I'm going to be heard as chastising, punishing. And yet here's this massive invitation that's going out. It's like, how are we going to live in the world together, folks? And how are you going to address me finally, right? I mean, I think that is like, it's courageous, it's open-hearted, but it also opens a chance for people to do the hard work of like, oh, like I am mired in white supremacy in ways I haven't really taken into account, and I can't just like say, like be all connected with you, without going through some really important struggle. And that struggle is, it allows white people to get rid of their hatred, their cruelty, their sadism, their smug, arrogant privilege. It allows them to become something else. It's like a petition for transformation. It's like,
Well, it allows us to become something else,
yes, that is true. It allows for a different kind of encounter that doesn't just repeat,
Mm-hmm.
the same encrusted forms of defensiveness or anger. And, it seems like really, really important. But I see that the I who is here, like when you say, I am here, whatever is being expressed, what if, I am here awaiting, waiting for you. So it's like whoever I am who is here is also relationally connected to a you who has yet to arrive. It's like you're waiting. You're waiting for the you.
Well, I'm waiting for the you is here, but the you is not fully in relation with me.
Yeah.
And so how do we achieve that? I mean, isn't that what the protests are about this summer? How are we going to create? We can't create a level playing field, that's impossible, but how do we create equity even in our intimacies?
Mm-hmm.
A sense of reciprocal recognitions. How do we do that if we're not talking to each other?
Mm-hmm. Mhm.
You know what is always surprising to me, Judith, is that people talk about systemic change. Somebody said to me recently, you know, you're so focused on the interior, but the interior, this is not the time for the interior. This is a time to look at the exterior and what's going on in the world, and institutional change and systemic change. But how is it that people don't connect individuals with institutions? How is it that they don't see that if a person doesn't change internally, what will be replicated in the institution is what they believe and who they are? And that is, I sometimes think maybe there's something I don't understand, because that people think that the institutions can change without people shifting internally is, you know, because what we saw in the civil rights period was that we got institutional change, we got policy change, we got legislative change, but people didn't change.
Mhm.
And so they just found a workaround.
Yeah.
for the you know, and it was important, the changes that happened. I'm not saying that, but we wouldn't be in the same place again now
Yeah.
if
Well,
people weren't reinstating the same things again.
I agree. And it's not just, well, I mean, as we remember back to 2016 and how deeply shocking and disturbing the Trump election was, you know, many people said, but I thought we had made all this progress, and now we have like these white supremacists, like what happened? Like, you know, this must be regression. And then they had academic fights about progress and regress. And the fact of the matter is that a lot of those massive, excellent legal changes, including, you know, the Voting Rights Act from '64 and all the work that's been done fighting racial discrimination and discrimination against LGBTQ people and discrimination against women, like and disability. I mean, you know, it looked like we were moving forward, even though maybe Obama wasn't as progressive as we needed him to be on some really key issues. But the fact of the matter is that there was a lot of unworked out racism, and not just among the right-wing militias who are getting ready to make themselves known again, I fear, but also among these so-called right-thinking liberals for whom their financial portfolio was, well, kind of more important, and they could vote for Trump even though he assaulted women and was a clear racist, because their financial futures were going to be better with him. And they would say, like, you know, white people in Arizona who I would meet, they would say, like, I'm not a racist, but I'm going to vote for Trump, and I don't like what Trump says, but I'm going to vote for him because that's going to really help my portfolio. It's like, no, to say I'm not a racist, but is racism. That is racist. That is the moment in which racism is reproduced, right? And that's incredibly pervasive.
And you know, and it was not only the people who claim they have economic motivation for staying with the Republican ticket, but there were also many people who didn't vote. And that also was incredibly insulting to me personally. I really took it as a personal insult, because you had somebody who was spewing racist, anti-immigration, DACA, anti-everything, and the ramifications were going to hit people like me first. And not me personally, but Black people,
yeah,
and me ultimately, and that people didn't feel that mattered enough is what I'm talking about. That those people who felt like my life is not going to be touched by the places that he has under attack. And who is that? What is that? When white people are like that, they didn't feel like they could even vote. They wouldn't even vote. I'm not going to vote for him, but I'm not going to vote because, it won't matter. And the misogyny also was, running rampant against Hillary Clinton. as we all
Yeah,
know.
yeah, for sure. But, you know, getting back to your question about the interior and the systemic, I mean, I wonder if Fanon would agree with that. You know, it's like when Fanon, you know, says, I do not exist, or I am not a man, right? What is he saying? He's reporting on a nullification that happens perpetually in his life. And I mean, that's somatic, and it is for him too. He's the one who says it. The racism is right here, like on the skin, in the skin. You know, not so much race, but racism
Mm-hmm.
on the skin, in the skin, right throughout as this somatic register. And if you don't mind, I'd like to maybe at this moment read something that you wrote that became incredibly influential, really think throughout the world, when you wrote about the condition of Black life as one of mourning, right? Because we can point to systemic racism and we need to, but how is it lived? You
Yeah.
know, who lives it? What are and what does it feed from? And so I'm just going to read this if that doesn't embarrass you too much.
Let's go for it.
I asked a friend what it's like being the mother of a Black son. The condition of Black life is one of mourning, she said bluntly. For her, mourning lived in real time inside her and her son's reality. At any moment, she might lose her reason for living. Though the white liberal imagination likes to feel temporarily bad about Black suffering, there really is no mode of empathy that can replicate the daily strain of knowing that as a Black person, you can be killed for simply being Black, no hands in your pocket, no playing music, no sudden movements, no driving your car, no walking at night, no walking in the day, no turning onto this street, no entering this building, no standing your ground, no standing here, no standing there, no talking back, no playing with toy guns, no living while Black.
Well, recently, Doc Rivers said, you know, I don't understand why white people keep talking about fear, 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 when Black people are the people who are dying. And then he said this thing that I will never forget. He says, I don't understand why we keep loving this country when this country won't love us back. And it just, you know, but it's the same moment. It's the same, you know, they can't even love us back in the state of mourning.
Yeah.
You know, it's as they kill us.
Yeah. But that's also part of your courage and your insistence, and I would say your politics. You know, it's like an American lyric. By the way, folks, this is America now, has been all along, an American lyric, an American conversation. This is, you know, it's like a recomposition of what America is or could be. And that's huge. If it's the case that this country does not love you back, it's like, still here, still here, speaking to you, wondering what is possible with you. I mean, it's an incredible, you know, it's it's capacious, you know, it's strong. It's really an amazing set of gestures. And I don't mean gesture in a simple way. I mean it in a big way.
Well, I think all the work that we see people like Brian Stevenson doing, for instance, or Barack Obama, or so many other, Maxine Waters, all of these people have been working towards a better democracy in this country, despite and in spite of everything that has gone on, the many ways in which we have been erased and killed and ignored and, you know, taken it in the body, literally.
Yeah, that's so true. Claudia, I know that you have thought a lot and worked on the situation with the two Coopers, black and white,
Oh, yeah.
in Central Park, and I know that you've been part of you put together a video that tries to bring out the the racist script, as it were. It's a script that didn't have to be written down anywhere, because this woman and so many women know this. White women know this. White people know this script. It's a very familiar script, and it gets passed down through the generations, and it gets shared among friends, and it circulates with impunity. And I thought that this was a really powerful piece, and I'm wondering if you'd let us show it here.
Yeah, it's a piece that I did with my husband, John Lucas. And it tries to do exactly what Just Us tries to do, take a conversation which happened in Central Park between Christian Cooper and Amy Cooper and extend it out into its historical resonances. And so should we show it? I think, yeah.
I think that would be great.
There is an African-American man. I am in Central Park. He is recording me and threatening myself and my dog.
Amy Cooper calls the police on a Black man birdwatching. Hers was a quotidian reminder of the normalcy of, how can I put it, having not been meant to survive. Christian Cooper, no apparent relation, asked Amy Cooper to put her dog on a leash. It was a simple ask, in accordance with the rules of Central Park's ramble. I am enthralled with Cooper's affect, her plaintive 911 call of distress,
I'm going to tell them there's an African-American man threatening
intensified with each repetition of the phrase, I am being threatened.
And there is a man, African-American.
I am being threatened.
He is recording me and threatening
By the
me and
third
my dog.
repetition, her voice quivers,
African-American man. I am in Central Park.
but she's able to
He is recording me
multitask and
threatening myself and my
reattach
dog.
the leash to the dog as she speaks. Like an actor heightening her fear in her performance of a line, she pushes on. I am being threatened. Cooper and I both recognize she can bet on racism, racial profiling, and possible unwarranted murder of a Black person to be supported systemically by random policemen, prosecutors, judges, and the carceral system at large. Our mutual socialization into repeated patterns of discrimination allows her to do what she does and prepares me to understand what she is doing in the daylight of what I am seeing. Where we part company, where we part, where I am no longer a part, is in her expectation that I will agree that she is afraid. Do fantasies create real emotions? Is Christian Cooper's possible death an acceptable loss? History says yes. Yesterday said yes. If fantasies are relevant to the moment, are they not also relevant to the consequences of the moment? Can I categorize Amy Cooper's behavior as an American story that plays fast and loose with notions of imagined fear? To imagine herself as a rescue, to imagine herself into a rescue narrative, is to activate a covert white female power trigger that can easily call in the violence of white men. One white friend puts it this way: Amy Cooper assumed her role as a piece of high-value white property in jeopardy, tapping into what she knows to be a salient catalyst for swift and deadly intervention. Given this, is her performance more incredulous rage than fear? The rules The rules don't apply to her. Am I to understand her as thinking, or is it feeling the fullness of, don't you see who I am? Is that white living right below, just below, a level of civility, unspoken but believed? Rage tied to white identities assumes sense of ownership of all property. Her park, her city,
I am.
her apartment building, her,
Because I would like to know who's friends
her president, her police
and why you're
force.
here.
Cooper's exact words were, I'm going to tell them there's an African American man threatening my life.
I would kill a nigger!
Hers is the language of good manners, weaponizing the narratives of white racism. Excuse me, she says to Christian Cooper as she dials the police. There are so many Amy Coopers, women like Lucy Foreman Hartley, the white woman who served as justification for the Tulsa massacre, the white woman behind the Rosewood massacre, the two white women behind the imprisonment of the Scottsboro boys, Carolyn Bryant Dunnan, who finally admitted to lying, but whose admittance could not bring back to life Emmett Till, or Linda Fierstein, who prosecuted the Central Park jogger case and willfully sent 5 Black and Latinx teenagers to prison for years. For years, on false and suppressed evidence. Do I need to go on? The various modes of behavior that white women weaponize in service of Black death are there to be metabolized. It's an old script, supported by this one.
What do you have to say for your people?
They've got a lot of work to do. A lot of work to do.
But you know what happened in Portland was amazing. The intersectionality of those protests, and there are lots of grassroots organizations now doing a lot of good work. I feel like Surge showing up for racial justice, who work in collaboration with Black Lives Matter. So the work has begun.
I think the work has begun. You know, it's an exhilarating time when we see what Black Lives Matter is doing and how many people have joined in. And it's good that a lot of white people are on the street and involved in organizations. I mean, I'm thrilled to see all of that. I just feel like I'm not sure. I'm not sure white educators have figured out how to deal with white people in their classes or in their worlds in ways that really let them see what they're doing and what the implications are. And I mean, I have to say, one of the things about your book is that, you know, you pretty close to the beginning, you tell us you're teaching a course on whiteness, you know, and I know a bit about whiteness studies and the white women who've done whiteness studies for some decades. Which was always really important, moving, excellent work. But I feel like you were doing something else, which has to do with the racial imaginary. Like, what does whiteness imagine itself to be, or what is the white way of imagining the world? But also, in this extraordinary piece that you and John put together, it seems to me fantasy is there. You know, you asked some questions about fantasy. And I'm wondering, what is the relationship of this fantasy that she's producing? She's producing a social reality. She's trying to produce a social reality out of her fantasy, and it's a shared fantasy. It's not just her psychopathological thing. It's a sociopathological fantasy that circulates rather widely. She could grab it out of the air because it was waiting for her, right?
Exactly. It's a script, a narrative that white people have, and they can rely on it. And the reason, you know, one of the things that I've been interested in a long time is, what's the difference when you yourself feel something and when you feel something and the world supports that feeling, you know? And I feel like that's what it means to have institutional racism. The personal fantasies become supported inside the world, so that Chauvin, he might be a terrible guy, but he's also part of the policing that goes on, and she can depend on him. She can depend on him arriving and perhaps shooting Christian Cooper, and that's a script she received.
Yes, I mean, that is systemic racism, right? She screams, she makes her phone call, she says some words which compel the police, put his life at risk. He could have died, at which point we would have seen the lethal consequences of that script. That's linked to other scripts. That's intersecting. That's systemic, right? So,
and this woman who works in corporate America. So that's why maybe I'm missing something, but that's why I think you really have to start talking to people because she can, in a minute, trigger an entire machinery that will come and murder. She has weaponized her fantasy and knows that she can depend on the system to carry out the violent part of it for her. Yeah. And, so I think we have to get a little bit more blunt in these moments about what is happening. I had people call me up and say, well, Claudia, she, what you did wasn't cool. That wasn't good. But should she have lost her job? Isn't that a bit much? Isn't that going too far? And I'm like, dude, don't you understand where this script ends? And maybe that's the issue with white people. They don't seem to want to accept that every time the script ends with Black people dying. It's not about, a lapse in judgment. It's about the activation of a script that ends in Black death.
Or Black death or Black incarceration or
some form.
Yeah.
Some form.
Yeah, I think that's right. And it has to be attacked at every part of that system, right? But, I'll just come back to one thing, I felt like, you are an educator, you're a teacher. Mm-hmm. And you were trying to figure out, like, how do I study this thing? Like what's my method? What are my resources? What's out there? And taking your students with you, right? And even though there are some examples in the field, you were doing something else as a poet and as a literary scholar. You were actually trying to figure out the imaginary, like how is this world imagined, and what are the consequences of that, which gives you a very distinctive way in. But I like the way you were compelled to move, to film and to history, to photos, to personal anecdotes, like it comes with your own poetry, which we all know is magnificent, and we were thrilled to have it again. And some people were like, "Oh, where's the poem in here?" It's like, come on, just let her do her thing. She's bringing it all together, because we need that multimedia, multi-genre approach to get what are the vicissitudes of racism, and how is whiteness kind of establishing itself at all these levels in our experience, right? National politics, intimate relations. Like we need a shifting lens. We need an interdisciplinary approach, which is, of course, what the Institute for the Racial Imaginary is all about. It's very explicit in that way. And I think it's a way to bring people in. It's not didactic, like here are your lessons, or it's not inculcation, but it's like, let's imagine together, how are we going to do this? How are we going to ask this question? And the stakes couldn't be higher because, of course, it does mean that white people have to some degree, take themselves apart. Like, where did I learn that? And why do I do that? And how am I part of this? And there is that hard kind of self-critique, which, Audre Lorde had us all do it. We were all doing it all the time. And it was super important. And it's a lifelong practice. You're that steeped in racism. It's a lifelong practice. It's not like, oh, I did my consciousness raising, it's over. No. Because it's coming back in you and into you and you're profiting off of it all the time.
Yeah, either you're racist or you're anti-racist. Like, that's just it. You got two choices there. And, one is that, I want to read you this thing. It was in an article in The Guardian, and it's still in my mind. I'm sort of teasing it out, but it was written by Nina Lahani. And she wrote, researchers reviewed 1.8 million hospital birth records in Florida from 1992 to 2015 and established the race of the doctor in charge of each newborn's care. When cared for by white doctors, Black babies are about 3 times more likely to die in the hospital than white newborns. This disparity halves when Black babies are cared for by Black doctors. So what the fuck is that?
Whose lives matter?
Yeah, I mean, and I'm sure if you talk to those doctors, the attending physicians, they would say they weren't racist, that they gave everybody the same care, and yet 3 times more likely to die.
Yes.
So from the time you're getting out of the chute, they're knocking it down because of their imaginative, dismissive understanding of who should be valued.
Yes, I think it's true. And I think medical treatment, I mean, one of the things, we're seeing the high cases of people with severe forms of COVID among Black and Brown communities, Indigenous people, all of whom have been, shut out of healthcare for all kinds of reasons, racist reasons. And I don't know, people would say, well, that's not racism, that's a pre-existing condition. It's like, no, racism produces pre-existing conditions.
People have said to me, oh, I once backed up my car and hit somebody, and a white woman was sitting in the seat next to me. And I said, I wonder what I hit. And she said, racism. Like everything I talk about is racism, but it's true.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's, it's there at every turn.
Yeah.
At every turn. And in Just Us, I wanted to take moments like that and show that all this research has already been done on it. In that sense, you're right. It is a book a little bit about pedagogy, but more about how does the imagination access that pedagogy in terms of understanding why we believe the things we believe and say the things that we say. And how do we get from saying all babies are treated the same and then take in a fact like that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I would say that what's interesting and startling about the petition in this book, and I'll and here, I don't know what it means to say as a white reader, but I'll just do that.
Well, do it. Go for it.
It's true. It's a trope, but it's true. Some things are a trope and true. Anyway, I feel like you're asking white people to do the work and to find it everywhere and not stop too soon and to understand it's an ongoing struggle. and that we have to keep uncovering the tributaries of our lives in which this is festering and strengthening. And we have to do it now more than ever because of what we're facing, and hopefully, well.
Unless we want to stand still. Yes, we have to do it now more than
We have to do it. But the other thing you say, which is that we don't just have to take apart ourselves. We also have to ask the question, do we want to live in a world with you? And do we want to make a world with you? And how are we going to imagine that world together? And you know what? That's a fucking great invitation, which is why I just think it's the most powerful thing, because most people are saying, oh, let's make a world together. They're like sanitizing the racism, they're covering it over. They're like, oh, we have to put all that aside so we can live together. And you're like, no, it's through this that we stand a chance of imagining a world together. So I thank you. I thank you for that. It was a beautiful gift and a beautiful demand. And who wouldn't want to live in the world with you?
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much.